Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this work session of the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. Today is Thursday, August 25th. The time's 9:30 a.m. With us today are Commissioners Emily Lindley, Bobby Janecka, our General Counsel, Mary Smith. I'm John Neerman. We're joined by staff as well. We've got a couple of items on our public agenda today, as well as executive session items, and we're going to take things a little bit out of order. Ms. Smith, I'll ask you to please call the executive session items.
The commission will meet in closed session in Building E, Room 211S at, we'll just say 9:31, as permitted by the Open Meetings Act, including Texas Government Code Sections 551.071 and 551.074, to take up and consider matters pursuant to items number 3 through 6 as posted and noticed.
Thank you, colleagues. We got to interview some really outstanding candidates for the OPIC or the Public Counsel position, and I'm going to move that we appoint Garrett Arthur.
Did you want to go back?
Do we have to?
No, but I understood that Commissioner Lindley wanted to perhaps take up one of the items back there too.
Oh, do we need to do that now? I guess, yeah.
If we take them out of order.
Yeah.
Can I finish my motion, or should I?
We can.
I think you can finish it. We maybe won't second it. Actually, I don't need to do it. I'll do it on my own later.
Okay.
All right. I'm gonna make my motion, and y'all do whatever you want with it. I'm gonna make it, and I might even vote for it. So, Garrett, I'm gonna move that we appoint you, Garrett Arthur, to serve as Public Interest Counsel beginning September 1st, 2022.
I second.
The motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Congratulations. Motion carries. I do want to compliment the other applicants. We've got a deep bench at this agency, some great leaders. Are we going to retire to talk about the other executive session item, or?
I think Commissioner Lindley said that she could wait.
I can, is this, yeah, I don't know if I need this on. I can wait. We don't have to do it. I'll just leave it at that for now.
Okay. I guess we'll go back to item 1 then.
Okay, item number 1. Item number 1 is the discussion of vacancies at the agency and strategies and needs to address those vacancies.
And Toby, let me just hand it off to you.
Sure. Commissioners, Toby Baker, Executive Director, thank you so much for bringing this up. This has obviously been a topic on our mind really since the pandemic, and it hasn't stopped. So what I'd like to do is maybe just set the stage for what L'Oreal and Kelly and the rest of the team are going to speak about. And I'll start with just a quick history of, two things that I want to hit on is sort of what we've done salary-wise. I think what you'll hear is one of the themes you'll hear today is salaries. But I want to set that up in the context of what we've done to this point, also with layered in with our return to office plan and where we might be going there. So I'll start with with salaries. And when I took the role as executive director, really as a commissioner first, I was focused on the idea of trying to systematically raise salaries across the board for the agency. And we have been trying to do that through two ways, internally and also through legislative funding. And so I wanted to just run through that, and I'll start with some of the internal things that we've done first, and then I'll finish with the legislative piece. But overall, we've, for the most part, we've managed salary increases with existing budget to support increases to our minimum base salaries. We've offered retention bonuses and recruitment bonuses using internal dollars. This is, to be completely honest, this has become less and less sustainable for long-term costs associated with raising minimum base salaries, but here's just a few examples of some of the base pay increases funded within our existing budget, within each fiscal year, obviously. In March of 2018, the minimum salary for natural resource specialist twos were raised by 5%. Engineers 2 and 3s were raised by 10%, Engineer 4 and 5s were raised by 5%. In November of 2018, the minimum salary threshold for classifications in salary groups A11 and B11 through A14 and B14 was adjusted, so the salary of each agency FTE was at least $30,000. This change included administrative assistants, legal secretaries, clerks, document services technicians, electronic technicians, and the entry level is now $2,611 per month, or $31,332 per year. In April 2020, the minimum salary for environmental investigators or natural resources specialists Series 2 through 5 was raised by 10%. This was limited to the Midland, Beaumont, and Houston regional offices, given significantly higher turnover rates versus other regions and other divisions using the NRS classification. In August of 2020, the minimum salary for attorneys 1 through 3B was raised by 5%. Also utilizing salary savings from vacant positions, TCEQ began offering retention and recruitment bonuses to minimize turnover in specific classifications. In 2017, there was a $3,000 retention bonus applied to natural resource specialist 3s. In 2018, a $2,500 retention bonus was applied to natural resource specialist 2s. Health physicists is applied a $2,500 recruitment bonus and a $5,000 retention bonus. In 2019, a $3,000 retention bonus was applied to the natural resource specialist 3 and contract specialists 3 through 5. A $5,000 retention bonus is applied to engineering specialists 1 through 3, and a $5,000 recruitment bonus was applied to engineers. Salary savings are also used to support one-time merits for exemplary service. For example, this was provided to certain employees following emergency and disaster response events. As I think we all know, that can weigh heavily on home lives and decisions to stay at TCEQ. So one example is after the TPC group plant fire in November of 2019, hurricanes Hannah and Laura in July and August of 2020, and the Lake Jackson public water quality issue in September of 2020, and the winter storm of February 2021, we extensively used that ability to try and quickly reward employees for the hours that they went above and beyond their normal 40-hour work week. On top of that, we have obviously tried to address compression, starting with some of the leadership in the agency to try to build the ability to raise our mid-level management. We've also addressed TERP administrative costs, and prior to the enactment of House Bill 3745 during the 86th regular session, TERP administrative costs were capped at $8 million per year. HB 3745 changed the allotment for administrative costs from $8 million to $16 million. That was, obviously very helpful. Also, commissioners, y'all were very involved with expedited air permits. Senate Bill 698 from the 86th regular session clarified that employees who work on expedited permitting cases can be paid their regular salary, compensatory salary, and overtime with the surcharge to the application fee. And we note that the permitting staff are largely classified as engineers and engineering specialists, and they've received also some across the classification increases that I'll get to now. On top of the things that we've done internally and the small structural changes that we've been able to work through the legislature, we have to give thanks to the legislature because they also have increased funding for salaries in 2015 and 2021. And those two examples are listed here. In 2015, our biannual request totaled $5.9 million to support an increase for engineers, engineering specialists, geoscientists, systems analysts, accountants, contract specialists, and attorneys, to name a few. We systematically lag behind other state agencies in these classifications, somewhere between 11 and 27%. The agency received $2 million for fiscal year 2016 through 2017. That allowed us to fund increases for engineers, engineering specialists, and attorneys. In 2021, our biennial request totaled $5.9 million to support a select group of mission-critical classifications: natural resource specialists, engineers, engineering specialists, and attorneys. Based on TCEQ's analysis of SAO data, our salaries lagged other state agencies in these classifications in upwards of 34%. The agency received $5.9 million for fiscal year 2022 through 2023. That resulted in the natural resource specialist receiving a 10% pay increase to the minimum salary. The agency also funded new annual minimum salaries, which are closer to the midpoint of the salary range for attorney series 1 through 5, engineering 5 and 6, and engineering specialist 1 through 6. So that's a quick snapshot of what we've done with trying to address the salary lag that we've experienced at the agency over the last several years. I'd like to also build on that foundation with a quick summary of our return to office plan that we instituted after the COVID pandemic. And I think we would all agree leaving for the COVID pandemic has proven easier than coming back from the COVID pandemic, which is something I don't think any of us expected when we were asked to vacate the office within a week in March of 2020. When we created the return to office plan, we identified 3 themes for the agency that we wanted to adhere to and try to solve. And one was intangibles, and I think about the family atmosphere of TCEQ, employee considerations, things like commutes, having elderly parents living with you, or having to take care of elderly parents, something we've heard a lot about here lately, and business needs for the agency itself. We blended those 3 things together and created a 2-2-1 hybrid plan, and we asked each director to create a work plan for their office. Within that work plan, the directors were asked to identify teams that should be in the same day to make sure that cross-pollination, sort of the intangibles, the business needs, was being taken care of. The water cooler talk that was important could happen, the knowledge transfer that just naturally happens with people being in the office. So they were asked to create Team A and Team B. Team A required to be in Monday and Wednesday. Team B required to be in Tuesday and Thursday. And then Friday would be a flex plan or a mandatory plan, depending on what the managers required of those positions at that time. Managers are required to have face time with all staff, and so they're not able to just come in Monday and Wednesday or just Tuesday and Thursday. They're required to have time with each team that's in. As part of the work plan that was created, we allowed directors to consider 100% remote positions or positions that were attached directly to regions. So essentially taking our matrix idea and expanding it and making it a little more liberal on how we grant that. Those 100% remote positions are required to come to the executive office for approval. The difference is before the pandemic, it was done on a one-off basis. What we're looking at now is more job classification, the type of work that's being done. Is it conducive to being done in a home office or in a regional office? Does it need to be here on a full-time basis? And we've instituted this new return to office plan, and it's been in effect now for a number of months. It's important to note that this plan took a number of months to create. We worked closely with downtown to make sure that we were in line with what leadership was found acceptable for state agencies. But I think we are seeing that we are still challenged with competitiveness with the private industry, not just here in Austin, but in many of our major metropolitan areas. We are also challenged with things like housing prices in places like Austin. And so we are currently exploring the idea of expanding the return to office plan and trying to identify a few more positions that we could attach to regional offices or allow for 100% remote. That is currently happening, and I'll let L'Oreal and Kelly talk about that more later. The goal with the return to office plan and moving towards this hybrid work schedule has never been equity between jobs. The goal has always been to create FJDs that reflect the actual requirements for the job. So the FJD would say it's a 100% in the office job, it's a 100% remote job, or it's a hybrid job. And so that applicants would know exactly what they're applying for, and not come in and have expectations of something that is not attached directly to that job function. So that is, we are still in the throes of sort of changing the way we do business to fit this new return to office plan. If you had asked me 3 years ago if this was even a possibility, I would have said no. But here we are. So that's hopefully lays the foundation and provides the context for where we are now, what we've done with salaries up to this point, with the means that we have, with help from the legislature, trying to remain competitive with our office planning and our work plan to try to keep up with really a lot of the private industry that we're working with across the, or working with across the state. And I will stop now and turn it over to L'Oreal. Thank you so much for allowing us to have this discussion today.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners, General Counsel, Toby, and everyone. Thank you, Toby, for your leadership on this effort. Commissioners, I believe that we would all agree that people are our greatest assets. You know, they are really the basis for us fulfilling our core mission, right? And all of our core functions. And we need to hire and retain great employees. And that's always been a focus for the agency. Certainly, COVID-19, you know, we had to toggle, if you will. And we're still managing in a new regime of what a workforce looks like and the places for work. And so, you know, at the time, Ramiro and myself would talk to all of the directors in one-on-ones, and we would constantly hear the struggles, the pressures, certainly the frustration with having large numbers of vacancies. So I went to Toby, and he completely agreed that we should all get together and basically develop a focus group, you know, get all the great ideas on the table, and that's what we did. I might need Megan's help to scroll down. She's coming. I had to phone a friend. Okay. Okay, great. So we proactively created a vacancy focus group. It included all of the directors of all the program areas. It also included budget and planning, because certainly when we're considering vacancies and what flexibility we have, the funding is absolutely critical in how we manage our budget and some of our ongoing obligations. So our budget and planning staff were able to come and give us a very detailed explanation of basically an overview of the agency's budget and our day-to-day operations and how that's impacted salaries, as well as, you know, things like merit dollars. And then, of course, human resources. They were at the table, and we had lots of discussions about our overall hiring process. We have 400 plus vacancies. You know, before the pandemic, that was probably mid 200s, and so we've seen a huge shift in our workforce. We were able to talk about some of the difficulties in hiring certain classifications, the retention of our current staff, looked at our hiring process, and many of those changes have occurred, but then there's many more that I know the Human Resources Division is working on. And then, of course, increase awareness amongst our leadership team of all of the options that are currently available to them and their staff when they're thinking about hiring. Yay, Megan, I did it. So here are the critical areas that were identified. Certainly our hiring process improvements, career ladders. HR was also able to provide information on the number of path positions that we have, and those would be senior positions in those career ladders, matrix managed positions, recruitment, funding, retention, and of course, Toby mentioned 100% telework. So some of the improvements that we talked about for posting, we had quite a bit of discussion about how can we standardize functional job descriptions for postings, because what we're seeing on the ground is you get a position filled, 30 days later that person may leave for a better job, or they commit to our position, and then before they show up, they change, or they're only here for a short period of time. So there was quite a bit of back and forth between our HR folks and our program areas, approving functional job descriptions and, giving Human Resources complete credit for it. They were able to work out a new process where we would eliminate that back and forth and come up with some standard FJDs that were PDF and just could, the program area could just simply identify the position number and we move forward, really eliminating a lot of that inefficiencies with posting because we have so many to post. Modernizing our job postings to better market TCQ and recruit and work in Texas. And I have a slide on that a little bit later. Also refreshing and expanding our transitions pool. We have several ways to hire in the agency. We can do it through postings, we can do it through transitions pools or express hire, and even our internship program. And so we wanted to take a fresh look at that as well. One big thing that we're doing starting September 1 is uncapping weekly posting limits. Previously, each office received 2 postings to post per week. And then, of course, OCE received a few more than that because of the size of their office and dealing with the regional staff. And then offices would swap whenever they had some flexibility. They would give another office their slot, if you will. And so working with Kelly's shop and OAS, we were able to, starting September 1, remove that cap. And so that won't be a bottleneck we can basically push more postings through the process. And I think that's important when you have 400 plus vacancies. Also, using the lean process. We've used lean in other parts of the agency for continuous improvement, from permitting to other parts of the agency. And so we want to take the same concepts of continuous improvement and take a hard look at our hiring process. And so that's slated to be done in the fall. So here are some options that we identified for posting vacancies and hopefully looking for some efficiencies here. Program areas can include multiple positions on one posting. That saves time for everyone, HR as well as the program area. Some positions where we're seeing tons of turnover, we can do open to fill. For example, for permit writers, we're seeing in a program area where there's 30 or 25 permit writer positions that need to be filled. They're entry level. We can do open to fill for those. Promoting early on the career ladder. So if one of our managers sees great potential in someone and they've been really producing and they're just a great employee, then they can send up a memo to the DEDs for early promotion. And that's really on the retention side. Also, as soon as someone has indicated that they are going to depart from the agency, maybe they're going to retire, as soon as we get those, that retirement notification, then we can work with HR to get those positions posted quicker. We've also talked about, and there have been a few examples of this, of converting one full-time position and splitting it and making 2 part-time positions. What we're learning through the pandemic is flexibility is really important to employees and potential applicants, and so that's one option, as well as the parent-friendly option, that's also available.
Quick question. It's just been a really long time, so I don't remember, but how do part-time employees affect our FTE count?
That we would just take and.
You can split one and okay,
They still count. They don't
Yeah.
count as two, they count as one.
right, okay.
Okay. Internships, certainly we have, I think, the best internship program in the nation with the Mickey Leland Environmental Internship Program. Of course, I'm biased, but I think it's true since I'm on the board. But we've talked about, we're investing a lot in the program, and if there are some interns that have worked for us this summer, finding a nice glide path so that they can continue working. Many of them have graduated, and they're just looking for the next step. And so we've done that a couple of times, and so certainly that's an option for us. Increasing the career path positions, of course, that means that there would be more slots available at those senior levels. Of course, that has a financial piece to it. We have to be able to fund that. But that's certainly an option if there's money available, let's say in a division's budget. We can certainly look at that. Transitions pool, I talked about that, but I wanted to focus on the last bullet up there, working with Erin Chancellor, who's our director for Office of Legal Services. She's really interested in working on a transition pool that's solely focused on legal-related positions, such as legal secretaries, paralegals, attorneys, and she can certainly work with the Commissioners Cluster on that as well, because you guys have attorneys as well. So just quickly on what HR has done with the standardized FJD approval process. Basically, the program area submits the proposed FJD to HR, the classification analyst. They create a standard form. The analyst convert it to a PDF and a fillable PDF. And so the program area in the future for those positions would just include the employee name, position number, location, and of course the supervisors. And then the program submits that standard FJD with any request to post, making it very quick and efficient process. Now, of course, it's best suited for entry-level positions where the FJDs don't change. Frequently, our higher-level positions, we tweak them. And in talking with Beth earlier, I think we've converted about 70 FJDs through this process already in about a month and a half, 2 months. So we're excited about the efficiency there. Modernizing our job postings. It was brought up in the vacancy focus group that if you look on Work in Texas or LinkedIn, they really are, the job postings are really starting to tell a story. And so we've been trying to focus on telling our story. And so HR has really added these areas to some of our job postings, who we are, what our culture is like, some of the benefits and perks of working at the agency, what your future team will look like, what will you do, and also adding division names. As well as if some of the positions are remote or hybrid, we would add those as well into the body of the posting. Here's a sample of what that looks like. Might be hard to see, but it'll be posted on the web. And so really we will, are you ready to make an impact on the environment? So really focusing on our mission. TCEQ is passionate about protecting the environment. It's at the heart of everything we do. Bring your innovative ideas, and so on and so forth. So really trying to describe our culture and why it's important to have great employees. And, a lot of folks, especially fresh out of school, really may have a passion for the environment. And this will point them in our way. Funding. Another part of our meetings, really, and I really appreciate Janae and Stephanie for attending and really briefing us on our budget, keeping us, our expectations realistic. We wanted to do everything we can within the agency and then work with the legislature on the other piece, because there's some funding that the numbers are just so large, we need the legislature's help with that. But one of the things that we talked about doing is, and just a recognition that our salary savings really fund about 35 positions, our Mickey Leland internship positions, retention bonuses, and then periodically through the year we will have additional funding requests. So our salary savings are really utilized for a good portion of some of the activities that we do at the agency. We also, looking at our normal vacancy rate, we also use those funds to fund about 6.7% of our vacancies, of our FTEs. So a fair amount of our salary savings are used to fund just FTE positions that the divisions don't have in their budgets. We use contingency funds, and that's basically all of the money that's left over after the budgets have been allocated to the divisions and our costs and our obligations have been met. We use any remaining funds, we call those contingency funds, and that's where we get our salary enhancement dollars as well as any emergency response dollars from. And so one of the things that we talked to the program areas about is, you can scrub your budget to see if there's help that can be provided to fund small individual requests. Let's say you want to post above the range that the position was posted for. You can use operating dollars to fund those as well, versus asking for agency-wide dollars, because we do have a limited amount of agency-wide dollars set aside. Toby talked about our LAR request, and again, that's the second piece of providing enhanced salaries to our employees, and we appreciate the legislature's help in previous years, previous sessions, and certainly we would appreciate their help with this session. We talked to the program areas about retaining salaries at the budgeted position, and we've been approving, those memos come up to the DEDs, we've been approving a lot of those. Let's say an experienced engineer leaves at, and that's a bad example. Let's say an environmental permit specialist 3 leaves the agency, and that would normally revert back to entry level. We've been allowing them in cases to keep those positions at the higher levels. Again, I talked about using operating dollars to help with salaries and salary enhancements. We've used targeted salaries, as Toby talked about, for certain classifications. And he also talked about the recruitment bonuses and retention bonuses that we've used successfully for some of our classifications. And, there may be more opportunities for that type of enhancement for some of our more difficult to retain positions. Employee retention, certainly higher pay. That's what we're hearing. That's what we're hearing from exit surveys and other things, higher pay. We've asked our budget and planning staff to look at our minimum one-time merits to see if, right now, the minimum is $1,800, to see if there's flexibility to increase that. We are also, the program areas have been really emphasizing advanced technical training and continuing education options as a way to offer development for staff, as a way to retain staff. Cross-training is certainly always a topic that staff are interested in. And then we're going to revamp the programs of the TCQ. We got lots of feedback from the directors on that. Make it maybe a half day with a completely different approach, similar to what we did with the diversity mentoring conference, where we had maybe round tables and the new employees get to talk to agency leadership more in a one-on-one round table format, as well as learn about the program areas. Teleworking, what we're hearing is some staff are moving to other local, federal, state, private sector entities for more 100% remote options. That's just what we're hearing. Or the other thing we're hearing is when we make them an offer, then they throw in, well, I have to be 100%. And so it puts us in a really tough spot. Also, Toby talked about the office return to office plan 2.0 that we're working on. And the offices are well on their way of putting together their plans. Almost done. We're updating our recruiting materials, and I know Beth and Kelly's going to talk more about that. We have a few returning to on-campus recruiting events with express hires. We're doing outreach through virtual recruiting and social media outlets. And then we have 23 recruiting events planned for the fall to promote immediate hiring, transition, and Mickey Leland. Some of the express hire events were August 17th, electronic technicians, inventory store specialists was an event that we had. We're planning for 3 more on-campus events. September, looking at administrative assistants, licensed permit specialists, and legal secretaries. October, enforcement coordinators. We have quite a bit of turnover there. And then in November, targeting really the fall graduates, right? They graduate December, and if we can have a recruiting event, this might be a great way to make them an offer. And as soon as they've graduated, they can start. So outreach to those folks. And then here's a list. We now have a list of associations that we can send our postings to. And we think this is really an additional way to do outreach for some great applicants. And we have we have a file that we keep, and so we'll continue to add to the list as we identify more associations. I can think of a few more right now. So, and then finally, we're expanding the diversity mentoring program to include new employees. And we did an outreach. We did a mail out to 500 newcomers. We're targeting the staff who've been at the agency less than 1 year. And we did have 15 new staff to sign up for the program. And we plan to basically identify a mentor and pair them with the mentor. And so we plan to do another outreach right before our new round of mentee mentor selection. So we're pretty excited about that. And it's just another way to keep our new employees engaged and hopefully retain some of them with the agency if they feel a connection. And commissioners, I think that's all I had. I'm happy to answer questions, or we can wait till after Kelly's done.
Any questions?
I might have one in a little while, but Kelly might get to it as well, so I'll let her go first.
Right, I'm going to give Beth a minute to come up and drive the computer for me. Thanks. For the record, my name is Kelly Kiel, Director, Office of Administrative Services. Appreciate the opportunity to be here to discuss this topic. I also want to be able to highlight the efforts of the other offices across the agency and what the HR division has done to work to fill vacancies. So I'm going to go through some trends and some data that we're seeing as it relates to separations as well as hiring, and talk a little bit about retention and recruiting as well. So I'm going to start with the good news. We have filled 756 positions in FY22, if you can believe that. That's about 495 positions have been attracting new talent to the agency, bringing new people into the agency. So to me, that says, we have a good reputation. People like our organizational culture. They like our mission. We have a strong organizational culture. And in addition to that, we've selected internally for 261 positions. So we're retaining talent, we're promoting our people, we're developing our people. These numbers are unprecedented. If you look at, FY22 and we go back to sort of pre-COVID 2019 as a comparator, we've hired 42% more positions than we did in 19. Now, unfortunately, we've also lost more people too. So we've had 29% more separations in comparing 19 to 22. So the blue are new hires and the green are the separations that we're seeing. So the highest turnover we're seeing are in classifications that support our core functions. So natural resource specialist, engineering specialist, administrative program specialist, attorneys, and geoscientists. So for FY21, TCEQ's turnover rate is about 12%. Statewide and government, it's about 21%. For other natural resource agencies, it's about 10%. If we look at FY22, our agency turnover rate's a bit higher. It's moving towards 15%. So here we're looking at the annual salaries for, again, those top classifications where we see the highest turnover. So the blue represents the salary that on average folks are earning when they join the agency, and the green represents the salary when they leave the agency. And as you can tell, there's not a huge delta there. So we're having a hard time paying people enough to build a career here, essentially. So looking to vacancies, no surprise. Well, let's see. We have 400 current vacancies or more, as L'Oreal mentioned. We've got about 15% vacancy rate. No surprise that we have the most vacancies in the Office of Compliance and Enforcement. Here you can see the blue bar represents total filled positions and green represents vacant positions. Interestingly, we are seeing the highest turnover rate in the Office of Legal Services for FY22. That's at 21%. And here, the next slide, you can see what the vacancies look like by the regional offices. So the green bars represent regions that are at less than 90% capacity. No surprise, we see Region 12, the Houston area. If you can read that, they have a 19% turnover rate, or vacancy rate, excuse me. Not a surprise there. What is surprising is you look at some of these other regions. San Angelo has a 50% vacancy rate, 17% for Midland, and 14% for Abilene, which is different than we've historically seen. And I think these high vacancy rates can potentially impact our ability to fulfill our core mission as well as respond to disasters and emergencies. So why are we losing folks? Well, the state auditor's office conducts an exit survey that's standardized, it's web-based, it's given to all employees. TCQ has a fairly high response rate to this survey. So our response rate's about 36%. Their average is about 14%. So if you look in the last 6 months, we've had about 252 people separate from the agency, and 90 of those people have completed the survey. So what we've seen in those surveys has been pretty informative and interesting. So why are folks leaving? The green piece of the pie, better pay. So early part of the calendar year, 41% of folks said that's why they're leaving. In the last few months, that number's even higher. 61% of why people are leaving the agency is better pay. So where are they going? Well, we're losing folks to the private sector, not a huge surprise there. But also looking at the dark blue and the light blue charts, we're losing folks to other state agencies in the realm of 19 and 21%, and other governmental organizations as well. That's a significant loss for us. We're not competing with other governmental organizations. Okay, next slide illustrates salary. So it's significant, and it shows what the prospective salaries are of people leaving TCQ when they leave, and it's going to be substantially higher than what we're able to pay here. So if you look at the green section of the pie chart, you can see that the majority of people are leaving for a job that pays between $50 and $75K. You can also see that we're losing significant amounts to employment opportunities that are $75,000 to $100,000. So to put that in context in terms of our average salaries, our average salary hovered around $59,000 and it's been flat since about 2016. We did see a bump, like Toby discussed, thanks to the Texas legislature. So the average has increased to about $63,000 a year, but as you can see, we're still losing folks for more money outside the agency. And I think the past slide too sort of illustrates and underscores our exceptional item request that Toby talked about as it relates to higher salaries. One more slide, Beth. But do they like TCQ? Do they want to return? Yes, they have a favorable impression of TCQ. So I think there's potential for opportunity to have people come back to TCQ that are qualified. And furthermore, just in terms of our networking and referrals and expansion of applicant pools, that TCQ is a great place to work. So that leads us to some of our recruiting, which L'Oreal and Toby have discussed. Did I lose track of my slides, Beth? Yep, sorry, thanks. So some of the challenges we're facing as well, we have vacant positions. We're in the process of hiring 189 positions, but we've also had to reopen positions and cancel positions. Some of this may be due to the fact that we haven't attracted a good applicant pool, or our top applicant or applicants have said thanks but no thanks, so we have to start over again. L'Oreal talked about taking advantage of the transitions program and the express hiring events that we've put together to kind of maximize our efficiencies there. Time to fill positions, again, we're looking at the top 5 classifications with the highest turnover. It's about 100 days, roughly. I think the FJD work we've done too will help to improve some efficiencies there and some other ideas. And now to recruiting. So we're using social media, as is everybody, the professional organizations that L'Oreal talked about, and taking advantage of the great candidates we have through the Mickey Leland internship program as well. We're really excited about this fall. We're calling it our Tour of Texas. We have a number of recruiting events planned at these institutions of higher education. A number of these are in person, which is a change for the first time in several years, so we're really excited about that. Once again, it gives us an opportunity to engage with folks in person, talk about our organizational culture, talk about our mission, and I think that's what attracts people to us, so we look forward to that. Toby talked about our retention efforts, as did L'Oreal. Salary increases and equity adjustments, again, thanks to the Texas legislature. We've used one-time bonuses in recruitment and retention for key positions. We've worked on our workforce policy with remote work opportunities, as well as enhanced and improved employee engagement efforts as well. So as we wrap up the conversation, definitely want to thank L'Oreal for her leadership on this. I also want to note the hard work and dedication of the human resources staff. They've had the same issues that everyone else in the agency has had in terms of being plagued with vacancies and turnover. Also, the hiring supervisors across the agency. I mean, the hiring process is a resource-intensive process most of the time, and so that takes away, from their demands of their other job. And then the other divisions in OAS, IRD, financial administration, budget and planning, as y'all have heard, they work in partnership with HR. Every time we bring a new person on to make sure, they can start from day one, they're going to be paid, they're going to have a computer. So it's really, the turnover has increased their work as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Anything else from staff on this item? Colleagues, questions, comments?
I don't have my question anymore. I don't know. This report was really telling. Man, that was some quality data. I really liked the way it was laid out and presented. Learned some stuff, and I'm gonna need to put my thinking cap on. Right? What do I need to do to help to contribute? I welcome suggestions and thoughts on that anytime. We just have a whole lot of work to do, and none of it's quick, fast fixes. And y'all have clearly been doing so much. I know there were a lot of people that might have tuned in today because they were interested in this topic, because there's a lot of people out there concerned about us having this many vacancies. And so, it's just going to take a whole lot of work on all of our part to figure out a solution to this. We're not alone in the state. But I think one thing we're just really going to have to push for is our request in our LAR at the legislature next year. That's not going to solve all of our problems, but the data clearly says pay and benefits goes a long way, and so we gotta push that hard. But I'm not saying anything new or anyway. I'll stop there. Thanks, y'all. I really enjoyed those PowerPoints.
Thanks, Emily. Bobby?
I had a couple questions, and I'll ask the first for you, L'Oreal. Invite Kelly's comment or input as well, but it's about RTO 2.0, the return to office update. We're taking a second look at it. It sounds to me that there's a good hard earnest look right now where we're trying to review which of our currently 221 employee workforce, FJDs could appropriately fit into the 100% 3+ remote or 100% remote work category. Have y'all asked staff and managers to take another look at the 100% in-person, shifting over to 221s, something short of a 221, if they can get 1 day a week, where the work can be recalibrated to try to allow the people in the 100% remote to also fit into the new TCQ paradigm. That to me seems like a really profound discrepancy from the perspective of staff to look at. Oh, I'm glad that they're looking at trying to improve and offer more telework for our colleagues who already have telework, but what about us? We're here in the office every day and we see our staff coming and going, and I think the impact of that really disproportionate. It's easy for me to lose sight of that, where I'm so focused on the work wherever it happens to be, all over the place. Have we asked, and do you think that review is underway?
I'll take a crack
Started
at
with you, L'Oreal, and turned to Toby.
I'll take
Yeah.
a crack at that. The directions for the RTO 2.0, it was sort of along the lines of, the first RTO laid out the 221, the idea of having folks in at the same time, 100% remote. I would say the directions are to expand on that. So when we met with directors this week, we didn't provide specific instruction that said just look at 100%. So the idea is for them to take a look at their work plan in general and come back with proposed changes on an office by office basis. So that I would say that freedom to consider what you just presented is part of that review. That being said, I do want to hold closely to this idea of that the FJD starts to reflect the type the status of your work. So whether it's in the office, hybrid, or 100% remote. And part of the reason for that is we obviously have positions that just do not lend themselves to 100% remote. They may not lend themselves to hybrid in a great way either. And so I want to we just have to be very mindful that we don't lose sight of the core function of the agency in the sense of trying to create some sense of equity, because there are certain employee positions that don't lend themselves to those sorts of things. So we're balancing that, but that is absolutely something that the directors have the leeway to consider as they're looking at what I would call 2.0 of this plan.
I really appreciate that. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I asked the question merely to make sure that we have that level of thought that I think all of our managers are giving to where they can try to allocate and set expectations for here's this part of your mission for helping TCQ work, and the expectations for this particular FJD or that FJD. And I think that those questions are being considered, so I'm grateful to hear the response, and I think it's important for all of our staff to hear that those questions are being asked. And
I think Toby's spot on. The only thing I would add is that since we are a state agency, we have to balance everything, right? Core mission functions, serving the public, and so we do have some boundaries. And so we've tried. In the first version, the directors, they submitted probably 20 or 30 pages each, looking closely at functions and personnel and things like that. But we've also been getting lots of requests from the directors, but they're really like one-offs. Every week there's, can we do 100% for this person or that person? And Toby's idea about let's just take another look altogether so we can look at it holistically, because I think what we find sometimes, I think the reality is sometimes you'll see a mass exodus from one program area because some employees qualify for jobs in other program areas. Not a bad thing. We like lateral moves, but they're applying because of options for 100% work, telework. And so, we want flexibility, but we have all these other things that we have to balance as well and still get the job done.
I really appreciate that. I think it occurs to me as well that exactly to that point, this is the low-hanging fruit for where we can make the best impact in trying to retain the staff that are most moving in those numbers that we can discern. The universe of those employees who are fully remote or fully telework really are very small relative to where most of our workforce has been able to fit into a 2-2-1 posture, which I think really puts us in a very nimble and newly responsive agency posture in relation to disruption from storm, event, external pandemic. You mentioned turnover and programs moving from one part of the agency to the other, and that relates to the second question I had, which is the internal looks at where are our vacancies, where's the heat map of the dire urgency of work is getting allocated across a much smaller number of employees in this pocket. Have we also looked at that data added on to where has there been turnover over the past 12, 18, 24 months to add on to that heat map and worsen it? So where are the currently emptier pockets of the agency relative to the others? And where are those, maybe it's even worse than it looks because those staff who are there are a little more fragile, they're newer to the agency, or the senior staff are really stressed because some of their new peers. How dire does that make it? Are there some smaller pockets of the agency that we really need to take a close look at staffing up or looking at what's the story for where they have more turnover or vacancies?
I was just going to add, Toby, if that's okay, and then maybe Kelly or so, Commissioner, every quarter we all sit in the room, the executive team, and we look at metrics that are reported by all of the divisions and all of the offices. We get an office report, but it's broken down by division. As a part of that exercise, we get data on the number of vacancies by office, by division. Some of the ones that stand out for me, certainly OCE, and as Kelly pointed out, there's several regions certainly some that are unexpected. You wouldn't naturally think of that, but there's some in, for example, the Office of Water. I see Carrie Michelle here, certainly in our drinking water program, which is vital. And this, to me, that's just a small example, but it's probably reflective of other program areas because not only are we seeing in that particular program area vacancies for FTEs, but they have a large number of support contractors. And through UTA, and of course, they're probably in the same boat as us. There's certainly in Kelly's shop stands out to me, and the attorneys. Some of the permanent programs have been pretty stable, but we do get that data every quarter. And I think it's very informative because we also kind of correlate it to performance measures and performance. That's what I was going to add, Toby.
That's correct. And I would say there was one chart that Kelly put up that sort of talked about where that turnover is. And for the most part, it's where where we've struggled in the past, those positions. I think one of the things that's really with telework, where we've seen the challenge maybe get a little bit more exacerbated is with other state agencies that are at 100% remote for the exact same job. So let's think about a contract specialist. That skill in state government translates across every state agency because they're working by the same rules, the same laws. And if we're competing against another state agency that's offering 100% remote and more money, it becomes hard to hold on to somebody who has that type of skill that translates across agencies so easily. And so that's something that we've been, thinking a lot about. The other thing that comes to mind is as I heard your question and have really L'Oreal talking about Carrie Michelle's group is just also the expectations on the agency right now with work. So for example, Carrie Michelle's group, it is not uncommon for somebody in her team to be working all weekend. The expectation, whether the law and the rule is built to the laws and the rules are really built for the local governments and the local water systems to handle their issues, and then us to be sort of there as a last resort. But over the last several years, that expectation has flipped to where we're expected to be involved with every water issue across the state of Texas. And so the impact of that is groups like Carrie Michelle's group or Craig's group at OCE being involved all weekend long, every weekend, somebody being on call. And I think one of the things that I would say that's not necessarily captured here is just the idea of burnout, and how does that sort of layer into this discussion. I don't know if we can really capture that. What gives me hope is the graph that Kelly put up that shows that I think 81% of the folks who leave like it here. So, maybe we can get, at some point attract them and get them to come back. But it's just sort of some of the things I'm thinking about there. And L'Oreal are just talking about this yesterday about trying to get the next step of this is getting creative, I think, with some of the workload that I think some of our staff are asked to take on, but not all of our staff are asked to take on. And how do we find a way to lighten that load so they can have quality time with their families on the weekend? They're not working holidays. They're not working well beyond the normal time with really a salary that's not moving to adjust for that work.
I appreciate that point, and I want to respond on the burnout point. I'm really grateful to know that y'all are looking so closely at the live status of where the workload and the prevailing quality of life and contention or contentness of the employees. I feel that it's incumbent on me, and I don't presume to speak for either of y'all, but I think that I see it as incumbent on me at this level to be receptive to executive director staff looking for those parts of the agency where our programs and the program staff that we've stood up as best we can with the available resources the state's providing us for those functions, where that workload has grown over time, and in particular where local government expectations for our response to these issues that really do crop up, not just all the time on a routine basis, but seem to go up exponentially as population growth increases demands and stresses on those systems that we interact with. It really can dramatically change how much our workload is, not just from one year to the next, but over time we have clear trends. And if that points to our staff increasingly accruing a lot of comp time that maybe they can't ever use, that's a problem. And I would hope we would step in and help identify those points and help bring to the legislature's attention where that seems like a great place for the state to retain the value and the investment in the labor that we've made in our good staff that we have in those parts of the agency that are doing a lot more with less and continuing at the staff's expense, really, having a team member on every weekend, working through the weekend, is really not a permanent, sustainable posture. And I think that hides the true impact, where there's probably a lot more than just a few staff. The number of state employees who I think, you honestly account for all the hours you work, but it feels like sometimes you work more hours than you're really able to honestly account for at the end of a work week. I'll leave that there. But the burnout of employees is a real big problem in my mind. And so where that seems to suggest we need more workers, more FTEs, putting contract dollars to bring some of these outside ancillary staff into our workforce, or helping put into our ask to the legislature. This is an area we think needs to grow, and perhaps it's more funds. Perhaps it's expedited permitting, that sort of a model in this different space of our agency program.
Let me address one point you made, Commissioner, and not that I disagree with you, but I'd like to, right now, adding additional FTEs is sort of secondary to me to filling the vacancies that we have. So I want to focus there on the vacancies that we have, filling those, and then trying to convince those good folks to stay before we get into expanding those FTEs.
I love that response, and I think that we're prioritizing the symptoms and responding as best we can and doing that strategically. I just want to commend y'all for getting, I think, good environmental data on our workforce, so that when the time then comes that we want to focus on that FTE number, I think that we've got a good solid basis for looking back and being able to show where these retention conversations and actual numbers of staff movement help us make that case. I appreciate it.
Comment and then a question. We were just talking about, adding total FTEs, and of course, to Toby's point, an FTE doesn't do us any good until we can fill it. So we're focused in the right place. But just for perspective, I think it's still true that we have fewer FTEs now, filled or vacant, fewer total FTEs than we had 20 years ago. And in those 20 years, the population and the economy has boomed in Texas. The demands on this agency have exploded. There's a lot more regulated activity. So we have been efficient. We have squeezed more performance out of our great employees over those 20 years. So there's not a whole lot of room to squeeze anymore, and we need to do right by our staff. So I appreciate the focus on burnout. I think we just can't let that happen. I had a question about 100% remote working, or really any remote working, because there's an old-fashioned notion of work that if you're not in your chair, you must not be working, which we all know is not true during the pandemic. I think some of us were surprised by the metrics that we actually did capture that showed that we were performing as well as we did in previous years, in some cases even outperforming. My concern is that there's still some skeptics out there that need to be convinced about this. So I'm wondering what metrics might we need to track remote work just to convince any skeptics that it's actually working, or also to identify any issues early and catch them early and address them.
I'll take a first crack at that, and then I invite you all to make any addition you like. So the first is the quarterly metric meeting that L'Oreal talked about earlier. That's something that's new that we rolled out sort of in conjunction with the return to office plan. I think the idea was we need to have the data, and I think the directors would tell you it's a lot of data and it's a lot of work to put it all together, but in being able to defend our shift to this new paradigm for work, we need to have the data to support that. So it fills two roles. It fills one role in the sense that it keeps us in the executive office and through us, the commission, informed on the performance of the agency, whether it be permitting or FTE counts, vacancies, those sorts of things. So it one just allows us I think a regular look at where are we on some of these timelines, how are we doing, but two, it provides us the defense to that criticism. So when we start looking at those quarterly metrics, we can show we haven't lost anything here. In fact, we've gained here, and so by tracking that on an almost real-time basis and having a quarterly meeting on it, it's top of mind for me. I think, not everyone here has the opportunity to go downtown or be called by a legislator. And so for me, it's very helpful in the sense that I've got that pretty handy. And if somebody asks me about it, I can address it pretty quickly. But on top of that, outside of the quarterly metrics, we've asked Mike Hardison to join us in this effort. And I think part of the auditing plan that y'all just approved has some pieces built around this into it about return to office and making sure that we're tracking all those things. And so I just want to make sure that that's part of the discussion too, because we've asked, we don't want to you're not aware of your blind spots until it's too late. And so asking him to come alongside and try to help us identify those as we're going through this is something that I think is going to be very useful for the agency.
Thank you for that. I don't think I have any other questions. Colleagues, anything else on this item? All right. Toby, Kelly, L'Oreal, thank you. Mary, I think we can call the next item. Yeah, why don't we do that? Why don't we take a 5-minute break? Time's 10:40, we're in recess. It's 10:45. We're back on the record after a short recess. And Toby, let me hand it off to you to tee up.
Well, do you want me to?
Oh,
call
I'm
the
sorry.
next
We need to
item?
call the next item. Yeah, Mary, please.
Item number 2 is a discussion of the current drought, the drought monitor, and impacts resulting from the drought, including effects on drinking water systems, water rights, water availability, and reservoir levels.
Thank you. Toby?
Thank you. Again, timely topic. Thank you for asking us to discuss it today. First of all, just want to give some thanks for the rain that we've gotten across the state over the last week or so. It's been very helpful. I never, we've had a few little flooding incidents here and there. Not that I would ever wish for that. Maybe a slow, steady rain is what we really want, but it's been very helpful. I don't have a whole lot of introduction to give on this one. I think we all know what the grass was like in our yards before this week. Crispy is the word that comes to mind. And so with that, I'm just going to turn it over to our experts and the folks who are really working on this on the front line. So, Chairman, I'll let them take it away.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners, and General Counsel. Thank you for having us here today. For the record, I'm Kim Nygren, Deputy Director for the Water Availability Division, and Carrie Michelle LaKyle, Deputy Director for the Water Supply Division, is here with me today, and we're going to do an overview of drought conditions and the agency's drought response activities. We're starting first with a map that we're all familiar with. It's our drought map. The latest update to that was on August 16th of 2022. We've had rainfall across the state since this map was generated. So the good news is when we see an update to this map, we think we'll see improved conditions for sure. And it could be that this map represents the peak of drought conditions for this year. That peak had 84% of Texas experiencing severe, extreme, or exceptional drought conditions. I wanted to put that map in context with drought conditions over time, going back to 1985 or 1895 to the present. And what I think this map has value in doing is to show us that Texas frequently experiences drought conditions across the state. But every once in a while, you see a particularly severe drought, and you see 3 of those types of droughts in this map, one between 1915 and about 1919, the 1950s drought, which is widely recognized as, and still is, the drought of record in some areas of the state, and then our recent drought from 2008 to 2015, and that is the drought of record in other portions of the state. It's exceeded the 1950s drought in some areas. But if you look at all of those severe droughts, what you'll see is they all look different. They all vary in duration and intensity, and they all develop and dissipate a little differently, which means we never kind of know what the next drought is going to look like, how long it'll last, and what the flavor of it might be in terms, I think, of impacts, especially. Zeroing in on the portion of that graph that focuses on drought conditions from 2007 to 2022, we get to look at and see how 2022 compares to that most recent severe drought. It's not as intense as that drought, and so far not as prolonged, but it's really too early to tell what the drought that really intensified this year on us is going to look like over time. This is a look at what reservoirs look like as of Tuesday across Texas. Statewide, our reservoirs are 69.7% full, but there's a big disparity in what you see in North and East Texas to what you see as you move west and south. So we still have areas in Central, Southwest, and West Texas that we need to keep a really close eye on and see what those look like over time. This graph is similar to the one earlier. It looks at statewide reservoir conservation storage, but it looks at it over from January to December, and it looks at 4 different years, 2011, 2020, 21, and 22. And I think what's good to note in this graph is that starting in January of 2022, we saw statewide reservoir conservation track what we saw in 2011. Until recently, when we've got this recent statewide rain, and we've seen a little upturn in that. So we are hopeful as we go forward that the drought outlook tells us that drought will remain but improve. And we're hoping that we'll see some improvement in those reservoir conditions, and that people will stay mindful that we're in drought and continue to implement conservation and drought contingency practices. Kind of turning from drought conditions to drought impacts and TCEQ response. TCEQ is the state agency charged with administering water rights. And we implement that authority through permitting and enforcement of surface water rights. Water rights have priority dates, which indicate the seniority of one water right over another. We often say first in time is first in right, but we also remember that domestic and livestock users are superior to all permitted water rights and are superior in priority. If one of those senior or superior water rights are not receiving the water they're entitled to, they can make a priority call to the TCEQ to enforce water rights and curtail or suspend water rights so that they get the water they're entitled to. In 2022, we've received 2 priority calls. Both were in the Colorado River Basin. Neither resulted in suspension of water rights because there was water present at the call site. We have areas of Texas that where water is more limited, droughts are more frequent or severe, and where there's just more competition for limited resources. And in those areas, we have established water master programs. This slide shows the 4 water master programs in Texas, working from west to east in this map, left to right. You'll see along the border of Texas our Rio Grande Water Master Program. The area shaded in green is our South Texas Water Master Program. The yellow mustard sort of colored area is our Concho Water Master Program. And then the area shaded in blue is our Brazos Water Master Program. Water master programs ensure compliance with water rights in their designated basins. They proactively manage water, and there's a number of different things that are listed in this slide that those water masters are out in the field every day of the week sometimes, making sure that they're monitoring and enforcing water rights in the area. And that proactive management of water rights makes water rights management more real time. And what we see is that typically results in priority calls being precluded in those areas because the water master is suspending and curtailing water rights. And we just don't see priority calls in those areas. In 2022, our water master programs have suspended and curtailed water rights, as you might expect with the drought conditions we see. There are widespread suspensions of temporary permits throughout our programs. There are also suspensions and curtailments of water rights in our South Texas, Brazos, and Concho Water Master programs. And all those programs have also seen an increase in complaints. Our Rio Grande Water Master program is different. Water rights on the main stem of the Rio Grande from Amistad to the Gulf of Mexico don't follow prior appropriation, but rather they're managed according to a priority of use structure set forth when water rights in this area were adjudicated. That priority of use structure is implemented through an allocation process that's set forth in TCEQ's rules. And one of the functions of our Rio Grande Water Master is to allocate water there according to our rules. Our Amistad, Falcon, and Ansel Duas reservoirs are all international reservoirs. Those are operated by the International Boundary Water Commission, and so our Rio Grande Water Master has to have regular dialogue with USIBWC, a regular exchange of all kinds of communication and data. And they also have to request releases from those reservoirs to make sure there's enough water in the system to satisfy requested diversions from our water right holders. We share the Rio Grande with Mexico, and so IBWC leads the application of the 1944 Water Treaty, but our Rio Grande Water Master will provide support in those communications and negotiations that IBWC does. I mentioned the allocation process set forth in our rules. This is a graphic that depicts what that allocation system looks like. What I want to note about this is that for the first time in the history of the Rio Grande Water Master Program, we had to make what we refer to as a negative allocation when we closed July 2022 accounting. A negative allocation occurs when the Water Master has to debit Class A and Class B water right storage accounts to restore system operation reserves. While this negative allocation directly affects Class A and Class B water rights, it can also indirectly impact municipal users who share delivery systems. They will sometimes incur higher transportation and delivery costs when less water is being used for irrigation. That either translates to less water available for them or a higher cost for the water that they do get, sometimes both. And in negative allocations, again, this is the first time we've done that through this program in July 2022, and it is a reflection of severe water shortages in the basin. Taking a look at what storage looks like in the basin, the third orange and blue bar represents storage in that system as of August 6th, 2022. That's where we're feeling like we've had the lowest storage for 2022 thus far. The red line you see right through the middle of the orange portion of that bar is our historical low for reservoir storage in that area, which occurred in 1998. So we didn't quite hit that historic low, but we were certainly approaching it. What we have in storage is a function of several factors, but that includes inflows into the system. And some of those inflows come from Mexico under the 1944 treaty. This graph is a graph of what deliveries under that treaty have looked like for the last 10 cycles, which is about 30 years, is what this graph represents. And the black line at the very bottom here is what we've seen in this particular cycle, which is about the last 2 years. We've had drought on both sides of the border, but the good news is, kind of looking forward, and there's a lot of fine detail in this that I apologize for. We've had widespread rains not only in Texas, but across the Rio Grande Basin. And in some areas, that's been heavy. So what we've started to see in the last couple weeks is we've seen the reservoir start to rise throughout the basin. So good news there, and hopefully that'll translate to more good news for us.
Good morning, Craig Pritzloff, Director, Office of Compliance and Enforcement. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, General Counsel, Toby and L'Oreal, and my colleagues from Office of Water. As you all know, the regional offices are at the tip of the spear in ensuring compliance and mission-critical work across our agency, and that includes during natural and man-made disasters. And a drought is one such disaster where we're at the tip of the spear working with Office of Water and identifying troubled water systems and working with them to update their status in real time, working with small business, local government assistance to provide that assistance, working with Texas Division of Emergency Management, Office of Water, and Critical Infrastructure Division. Some of the things that the regional offices are doing are they're investigating complaints related to water rights and unauthorized diversions. Starting in February, we started to see an increase over prior years in water rights complaints coming in, and we've been responding to those accordingly, receiving 130 so far for this fiscal year to date. There may be other public water system complaints that come in related to drought issue as well, concerning capacity issues, line breaks from dry ground, shifting foundations, which create infrastructure issues across those public water systems. And those are addressed through our normal processes. We conduct field observations. Kim had put up the graph or the chart on where water master areas are. Office of Compliance and Enforcement is responsible for those non-water master areas. And for drought purposes, the primary area that is of concern is the San Saba River Basin, and primarily out of our San Angelo Regional Office, which, as you saw from the prior presentation, with our staffing there, we're at one point down to one investigator in that office due to turnover in that region for a variety of reasons. But what we do in OCE, as we do across the agency, is we're one office, one agency, one state, and so we pool our resources accordingly across our office and fill in where needed. And that's one thing that we've been doing on the San Saba since May of 2022, where water flow in the San Saba started to go down. We've been conducting bi-weekly assessments and flow measurements at multiple locations on the San Saba since May of 2022. And we did one extra event at the Springs in Fort McCavitt in May. Thankfully, the rain dances and prayers have been working. The latest assessment that we did on the flow measurements on the San Saba on August 16th showed increased flow from the prior one. So that's good news for everyone, especially in that watershed. The regions will also look at temporary authorizations in light of drought conditions for water usage. And we've denied to date a total of 3 this summer. Small business, local government assistance, Andy is out there, are working tirelessly day in and day out, closely with Office of Water and public water systems across the state, doing outreach and providing assistance as appropriate for those needs. Also, our office with Office of Water, OCE, a Critical Infrastructure Division, we work very closely with Texas Division of Emergency Management. And so in addition to our own internal drought task force, which was activated earlier this summer, TDEM has a state drought preparedness council that they chair, on which we are members and participate in their weekly meetings. There's also a state emergency drinking water task force that we participate on with Office of Water and OCE representing on that, and that's been meeting weekly since July 14th. Public water systems may request resources. Municipal water systems may request resources through their county judge if they're short on water to obtain additional resources and funding assistance from the state or water supply as may be needed. And TCQ works closely with TDEM in assisting where we can. And at times our agency has even provided water through our contracts through emergency management funding. That's OCE. Back to you, Office of Water.
Good morning. I'm Carrie Michelle Kiel, Deputy Director of the Water Supply Division, and I'm going to piggyback off what Greg said and provide part 3 of our drought response activity, especially as it relates to our outreach and emergency assistance efforts. Much of our current drought response really mirrors our assistance efforts that we started back and developed in 2011. And as Craig mentioned, as drought started to intensify in late spring, the agency went ahead and activated that drought task force, internal task force. We right now have between all of the agency staff across various programs, probably looking at 40 to 45 staff that have to participate in that. And I think our key goal there is to make sure that we're effectively communicating and collaborating to ensure our communities are being able to retain their water supplies, particularly for drinking water. One of the things that Craig mentioned is that we participate on that Drought Preparedness Council. That council, along with supporting the drought's management efforts, prepares monthly drought situation reports on the status of drought conditions, delivers those reports to state leaderships. So when we're meeting in our weekly drought task force, we spend a lot of time compiling that information that we've collected as an agency, and we make sure that representatives on that task force report that out at those council meetings. As part of the council, there's also the State Emergency Drinking Water Task Force, and we co-chair that with the Division of Emergency Management. Other members of that task force include the Texas Department of Agriculture and the Water Development Board. And as it states, we're focusing on helping water suppliers find solutions to their water supply shortages. Another important tool that we're using to gather drought information to target our assistance efforts is through our online reporting portal. Water suppliers that are implementing water use restrictions are, as part of their drought contingency plans, are required to notify their customers, but they're also required to notify the TCEQ. And looking at this slide, I know the numbers are hard to see, and I'll report those in a minute, but there's an important date up in the left, or in the right-hand corner there, 1/1/2020. And because this is a year-long reporting portal, we really wanted to make sure that the numbers that we were reporting and monitoring drought conditions really reflected kind of what was happening currently. And so we did a deep dive into that historical data and kind of removed those systems that weren't on the same water supply restrictions, water use restrictions that they were previous to 2020. So if they've changed, we've gone ahead and updated that. So I think we're looking at a better reflection of kind of where we stand right now. So as a comparison, currently we've got 7,113 public water systems in the state. And of those, we've got 468 that are total reporting that they're implementing water use restrictions to conserve existing water supplies. 117 are asking customers to follow a voluntary water schedule. 349 are asking customers to follow a mandatory watering schedule. And then there's 46 systems that have prohibited all outside watering. So in addition to reporting water use restrictions to the agency, water suppliers are also required to report to us when they have less than 180 days left of water remaining. And they do this through that online portal as well. And as of August 24th, right now we're working with 16 systems that have reported having less than 180 days. So what happens after they report that, the agency quickly contacts the system, and of course we begin to identify resources for assistance. A lot of those assistance efforts are focusing obviously on identifying and securing alternative water supplies. That could mean finding a water hauling service. That could mean talking to other systems to find an emergency interconnection that they can use. And then the new thing that we've been doing is really focusing on emergency planning efforts. And, especially for our surface water systems, it uses a tremendous amount of water in their treatment processes. So what we've been developing is the opportunity to go out on site, look at those processes, see where we can make some conservation efforts, see if we can optimize their treatment processes, as well as, kind of revise their flushing activities, all while we're ensuring public health protection. So each week, the Emergency Drinking Water Task Force discusses the status of each of these systems, and then, of course, we work together with each of the members and their particular assistance services that they can provide. Another important aspect of the task force is that we really focus on funding. Every time we run into these issues, funding always is an issue. And so we've gathered representatives from the members of the Texas Water Infrastructure Coordination Committee, or TWIC as we call them, They also participate on the task force, and what we'll do is, once we gather information, we'll go ahead and refer those systems over to TWIC. And the benefit of using TWIC is that when systems come in, they're able to talk to approximately 11 state and federal funding agencies at one time, and then see what is the best situation, and depending upon whether or not they can find emergency funding or if it's more of a long-term situation, that has been very beneficial to help our systems. The agency will continue to contact each of the systems every week to monitor their status, go over emergency water planning, and then until the system is back to normal operation, we will continue to work with those systems. And as Craig mentioned, generally when a water outage occurs due to drought, systems also can request assistance through a county judge or a local emergency management coordinator. If the county can't supply those resources, then they can certainly request resources from the Division of Emergency Management, and TDEM and TCEQ really work in close coordination to determine what resources and technical assistance is needed to help communities restore water service as quickly as possible. The other aspect of our online reporting is that we also hear from systems that have more than 180 days, but certainly on the path to having more severe water outages as the drought conditions persist. Right now, we're working with those folks as well. Most of that we do is to look at short-term and long-term planning for them to mitigate future shortages. And as of 24th, there are 10 systems that we are currently monitoring that are in that situation. In addition to emergency assistance services, the agency continues to provide extensive drought outreach. Certainly looking back at the latter half of 2021, kind of saw the writing on the wall, and so we started conducting and hosting our drought preparedness and resiliency workshops. We did about 5 of those. And then we also talk a lot about preparedness and response in our drinking water advisory work group that we hold on a quarterly basis. Other outreach that we did earlier in later spring in May, the agency sent out drought alert letters to public water systems, water right holders, county judges, and county extension agents throughout Texas, obviously providing the warning of what the outlook was looking like, and to start preparing for certain water shortages. Other things that we're continuing to do, obviously, is have drought information posted to our drought website. We also have our numbers that we're collecting in terms of watching water conditions and water reporting. And then we also man a TCQ drought hotline during business hours, so folks can call in or the public can come in and certainly help them address questions that they've got about drought, or send them over to our groups to look at more technical assistance that we can provide. Other things that we're doing is that obviously we're providing information and encouraging conservation through general and targeted news releases, and then we're also starting drought-related blog posts that people can participate on. That concludes our report on the agency's current drought response, and we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thanks, Carrie Michelle. Colleagues, questions, comments? Emily?
We tried to put a positive spin on it, we really did. We did,
Bobby.
we got rain.
I very specifically did not ask for current numbers on some of the reservoirs and some of the state accounts, because I think that that's a situation that is rapidly looking rosier, and I'm cautiously optimistic there. But I do just want to acknowledge and say how grateful I am to some of the support we've gotten from outside of our agency, specifically the governor's office and our federal representatives in Washington, D.C. have been very supportive, as I have followed on to the drought alert letter that was sent July 26th to the Rio Grande water rights holders. I sent a letter to Commissioner Maria Elena Hiner of the IBWC specifically about water deliveries to Texas under the 1944 treaty, and that's a really critical issue that I just want to acknowledge the extraordinary efforts y'all are helping support our state's conversation around that policy space, and I hope that that situation is improving steadily. I know we've got a meeting to continue discussing that August 31st, and so that's another piece of this very complex issue. So thank you so much for the clarity today on some of the points.
What do we know about Amistad and Falcon? Are they, given the recent rains, are they seeing that yet, or is all the water being held in reservoirs higher up in the basin?
I was going to ask, what about the Mexican Basins? I mean, that's kind of where,
Yeah,
to tag on to your
what she
question.
said.
Yeah.
The good news is we see accumulations across the whole system in the reservoirs. It's too early to tell what those are going to look like. They've had bands of rain continue to fall across the basin, but there's some accumulating in the basins, and we'll have to see what that looks like, how much comes to the U.S. after accounting, and then just how much is there to support deliveries.
We can't talk about water without just, beating this drum one more time, and I'll beat it again. But the Farm Bureau case limited our ability to manage curtailment orders, to help out, for example, municipalities who are facing true water emergencies. And again, what that case was about is it limited the agencies, or told the agency that it did not have the legal authority to reach into senior water rights holders in order to help out a junior water right holder that was in real dire straits. So that's the law that we're operating under. I know that we've flagged this issue for the legislature, I think on multiple occasions, and it's just a reality that we are living with right now. And municipalities and others, as they're thinking about their future and what drought might mean for them, need to realize, I think most of them do by now, that TCEQ can't make rain and we can't take water from senior water right holders. Although I will note that you have a rainmaker sitting right next to you, L'Oreal.
Nice.
That's congratulations again, and that's I would not want that title right now. Let me just say that.
Depending on her.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it was at the end of last week, someone came to visit Toby and myself and made the comment that previous rainmakers had to deal with floods. And I get the drought, the second version of the drought. So the rain is helping me out. Thank you.
Yeah, you can't win.
You better knock on wood too, L'Oreal.
I don't think I have any other comments or questions. Anything else, colleagues?
I would just say good luck, Bobby. Truly. I
We're
do actually
getting
genuinely
to
mean
the end of this item. I'd like to clear up what happened for 3 to 6,
Oh, yeah.
if that's okay.
Sure, okay.
Before we end the meeting.
I think we're done with item 2.
that. Thank you all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great graphs once again, I would say.
And so I will say with items 3 to 6, we started to open the meeting, but then the commission decided not to meet in executive session, but did act on item number 4. And that's what the motion for the Public Interest Council was.
Thank you, Mary. What else do we need to do?
I don't have anything
Adjourn?
else. Yeah.
All right. It's 11:19. We're adjourned.